It's a lovely day for gaming. This is Fragments of Silicon.
All right, welcome to another installment of Fragments of Silicon. Joining me is, I'm your host Adam. Joining me as always is the regular crew. Let's get to the news. Right, Teddyfan, why don't you start us off? How are things with you?
I'm slowly being able to walk a little bit more since my knee surgery. I wasn't able to do physical therapy because my mom's thinking about getting a new job and she had an interview then, so that's fun.
Mm,
And that might make going to the doctor more difficult now. It really depends on what schedule they can put her on.
I'm like, the universe really does hate you.
I know. As far as gaming stuff, not a whole lot's been really going on. I started playing Destiny because it's now free to play.
To a certain point.
Well, yeah.
I mean,
And
it's still got the paid expansions.
yeah, but I'm used to that with like Final Fantasy and stuff, so I'm like, meh.
Fair enough. Maybe something new to add to the rotation.
Yeah, I'm going to do some testing with that later and see if I can run it on my PC or if I need to wait till I get my new one.
Okay.
Sometime before the death of the universe.
I mean, is it free to play on the PlayStation 4?
All platforms, and it has cross save.
Well, I mean, there's the PlayStation 4 version.
Yeah.
No,
But anyway, I think that's it for me.
All right, Galax.
Well, there's been a good amount of game news. In addition to, I've already started playing the game that I'm reviewing this week. The Indivisible game from Lab Zero, the people who do Skullgirls, came out, and I have not had time to sit down and play it yet, but it looks fun, and I have gotten the copy that I backed for. The Switch version, unfortunately, is not out yet, but that'll come later, and hopefully they take their time to make that good. I also have been still playing some of Luminous Avenger X, and also recently I was at a place that had some Switch games for significantly lower prices than usual for the physical copies, so I also got Dragon Quest XI, and I have not started that yet because I started it up once and got stuck on what I should make the hero's name be because I'm the kind of person that gets hung up on that kind of thing. But I came up with something, so I'm going to be playing that soon.
Okay.
Weather-wise, it's been pretty nice mostly. A little bit of rain, but, that happens. And,
Yeah, I was about to say something Northeast United States.
Yep. I had a headache a couple days ago that was no fun, but, end of last week, I almost had a heart attack because one of my tires was losing air fairly rapidly.
Oh, fun.
But it turned out that there was a screw in it, in one of the treads, which thankfully was fairly cheap and quick to fix, so I don't need to have a heart attack about that.
Yeah, I got
especially since I'm waiting for a dental bill. I was not looking forward to maybe having to replace a tire while waiting for a dental bill.
Mm-hmm. Oh, geez, I had to replace the tire on my last car, and it was like 160 because the car used special tires.
Yeah, same with my dad's.
Yeah, that's another reason why I got my current vehicle. It doesn't it uses regular tires that are regular tire pricing, so they're not double the expense. If then, but anyway.
Yep, that's about all I got.
All right, Twilight, you're up.
All right, well, after about a month this past weekend, we finally got some rain here that we desperately needed. I really appreciated it to finally cool everything down.
Mudslide?
I don't have to worry about mudslides anymore. That's one of the reasons I moved into my current residence. So there's no need to worry about that unless I travel outside of town. Then I have to worry about it then. Anyway, also over the course of the weekend, I went to the one of the local fall festivals that we have every year during October, and there wasn't as much as there usually was, but it was still fun to just walk around and look at everything and not buy any overpriced foods that they have up there. Know that this weekend they're having another, we are having another festival here in town that I can just walk down to without having to drive. And it's partially started today, but they didn't have much out. So I have to wait till probably Saturday before they have everything else so I can actually look around. In other news, work's going well, and in terms of games, I've been playing the rather charming game I have to review this Sunday, and that's about it.
Okay, it's my go.
Yep.
Let me see. Well, I mean, the weather is still hot and muggy at times, but it's also, it's also feeling fallish. Like the nights are in the 60s.
I was about to say Florida fall.
It's like, yeah, the days are still in the upper 80s.
Do you guys even have actual trees?
Where I am?
Like non-mangrove? I'm kidding. I know you do, but...
Well, it's like, actually, yes, because I'm still in like the deciduous part of Florida.
Yeah, there are large parts of Florida that kind of don't have much in the way of trees because...
Yeah, they're actually in the actual subtropics and whatnot.
Anyway.
Yeah, anyway, like that's kind of getting down, but that's down south. Let's see. Dealing with show stuff. The next couple of weeks are kind of spongy in terms of guests because, well, it's a busy time of year. Like, it's like a lot of people are finishing up projects and all that stuff. But, it's like, it plays fun with the scheduling. And by fun, it means, I need to delay this. I need to cancel out. It's like, just, it's part of the stuff that goes behind the scenes in creating this thing. And that's about it as far as my news goes. So, merrily we shall roll along to the interview portion of the broadcast, and joining us this week, returning to the program is Lorne Lanning, and joining us for the first time is Bennie Terry III, both of Oddworld inhabitants.
Well, thanks for having us.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Great to be here, Adam.
No problem. How are you both doing tonight?
Oh, working.
Yeah.
Working. We are deep in the grind and been there for a while and still have a while to go.
But enjoying it.
Yeah, can't complain too much.
That is a familiar story.
Yep.
Like,
when I was jealous listening to you guys tell your news and you were playing games, I was like, where do you find the time?
See, the trick is we don't always get to play the games we want to.
Hell yeah. That's
it's also we're not necessarily obligated to finish the game. It's more we might play it for a few hours and then not more because, well, yeah, it's like we do have, we have lives outside this thing and, time is limited. So, well, plus individual people can handle individual games. So, there are ways of making it work.
Right.
Also some games only last about an hour, 2 hours. Anyway, getting back on track here. We're going to start with Bennie here because this is the first time he's been on the program. Plus, Lorne is kind of the face of Oddworld inhabitants. So
it's a good face.
Indeed. But, it's like, we want to introduce Bennie to the audience. And, how we start our process is, what got you interested in video games?
Just growing up around them. My friends in the neighborhood, just growing up as a kid, they would all bring their consoles to my house. And I didn't have any of the games or the consoles, but I was really good at figuring out the puzzles that they couldn't figure out. And so they were great at just playing, but I would sit there and watch. And it was kind of odd because they were like, "Don't you want to play?" I was like, "Yeah, eventually." But really, I was just studying, like, what's the strategy on how to kick everyone's butt? And once I got really good at doing that, then they would just go, "Look, we've got this game, like, I think it was called Section Z back in the day, which had 99 or 100 levels. And if you just made one wrong turn, you'd start over at the beginning." And that was my catapult in the stardom in the neighborhood or the block, because once I finished all 99 levels the next day and my buddies couldn't finish it over like weeks, they said, "Hey, all our games, we're just going to leave at your house and you play them, you show us how to beat them." And then that kind of spiraled into me just going, I might be able to do this as a career. It seems fun. And that just began a kind of a love affair with video games, with entertainment over the decades. And it's never really stopped for me. I just enjoy solving those kind of problems.
Yeah, there are people who are like that. They tend to be, become like fighting game fanatics. It's like,
oh man, at UCLA, I played a tremendous amount of Virtual Fighter, Street Fighter, you name it. But it wasn't so much just fighting games because you have the challenge of figuring out combinations and all kind of different ways to succeed. But all games for me had a core philosophy, which was if you invested enough energy and time into them, you could kind of see into the matrix, right? And you would understand how to really be good at them. So I played Zelda fighting games. I played Ultima, all just puzzle platformers, anything I could get my hands on that was really challenging. And that's why Oddworld appealed to me as well, because it wasn't simple, right? It was complex, and you could really kind of go deep in trying to understand what the designer was trying to achieve. And that was what drew me early on to just hearing about Oddworld games and then wanting to play them.
Yeah, that is a good assessment of like even the original Oddworld games.
Yeah.
But anyway, so how did you end up in the video game industry?
So early on, I was at UCLA, and I started building simulations for the neuroscience department on groundbreaking like procedures and different things, just all CG. And that's really where I got my first taste of going beyond just tinkering or playing, but actually going into a creation and technical kind of capability to be able to pull off those demos. And from that, I had some good friends that I was able to show, like, "Hey, look what I'm doing." And then it went on to like CNN and CBS and all of these different news networks because it was groundbreaking research at the time that was being visualized in 3D. And from that, I got my first job at Motion Media on Silicon Graphics, like machines, doing work for a GTE interactive project because they saw that I could model, they saw that I could light, and I could do camera work and I could do animation. And I just had touched all of the systems that they were looking for. And that started my career. And so through a company called Motion Media, which was really a reseller of CG software like Softimage or 3D Studio or all of those content creation tools, they had a gig that we were building environments for GTE Interactive. And I just got really good at building, right? And I got really good at not only building, but then automating the process so that I could have like one click would generate all of the things I was trying to at a foundation. And that's when the next company was like, "Hey, we really love your work and we'd like to hire you here." And from there, I just met a great group of people, Jeff Landers and Margaret Pomeroy and Matt, mentors for me, that really opened doors for me to Disney, to Rhythm and Hughes, to many other places to allow me to kind of show people what I was capable of. And that's, that's my origin story.
And I suppose to complete the story, how did you end up at Oddworld?
First, so going back to Rhythm and Hues, like there was a legend there, really, and it was I always wanted to make video games, but R&H wasn't really into making games. Their business model was around film and television, and so I spent a lot of time TDing and building pipelines for that. But people would tell me from time to time, there is a group that left Rhythm and Hues and they built their own video game franchise, and it's Sherry McKenna and Lorne Lanning from Oddworld, and this is how they did it. And it was kind of a legendary tale that stuck in my head, and I was like, I'd love to meet them at some point just to say how much of a fan I am of the products they made. But then many years later, fast forward, I was working on a Marvel production, and Lorne was brought in to consult. And we kind of got reconnected. And when they found out I was working from Rhythm and Hues, and I was like, yeah, you guys are kind of legendary to me, and I wanted to kind of put my best foot forward. I really was, overdoing it and overselling it to show that I was capable, of doing work at their level, right? And at that time, I was like art director and technical art director and those kind of things. So after that, Lorne said, look, if you ever decide that you want to, move on from this company, I'd love to give you a recommendation, right? And that point came. And I said, hey, I'd love to get that recommendation now. And he said, well, actually, I really enjoyed working with you. And instead of getting the recommendation, why don't you come run my company, right? And what an offer of a lifetime. And I didn't even negotiate a price. I was like, I'm in, right? Let's do it. Where do I have to be? And, I was like, oh, San Francisco. I live in LA. So, yeah, I'm in. Let's do it. And I jumped on the next flight out to just, make it work.
I mean, how long ago was that?
That was, wow, I'm going to say it was about maybe 5-6 years ago. Don't quote me on the exact date, but it was around 5 or 6 years ago that we started on another venture that wasn't Oddworld Games, but it was another idea that was a VC funded project, and it was kind of ahead of its time for what we were trying to do. It was using game engine technology, using game engine learns or game philosophy learns, but really to build a platform that was like a synchronous sharing platform to allow people to watch concerts and other things around the world synchronously and enjoy them in a real-time environment like what you see today in VR, but at a massive scale with like tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people in a virtual stadium. And so we helped build the IP and, built all the core technology around that. And I was managing and running that operation. And then at some point, we decided like building Oddworld Games and continuing that legacy, which really attracted me from the beginning. Like I just wanted to work with Lorne and Sherry, right? But so whatever it was, I was into doing it, but I really wanted to leave my mark on an Oddworld product, right? And I wanted to go back and like whether it was a Stranger remake or a new IP, those are the things that really excited me. And so, finally we came full circle to building those products again.
Indeed. And I suppose that leads us to the present, more or less.
Yeah.
Or at least the present game, because we had Lorne on the program about 5 years ago.
2014-ish, somewhere around there, yeah.
Yeah. It was around the time Oddworld New and Tasty was still new and fresh.
Mm-hmm.
And, in that time, a new Oddworld game has been announced. For those who don't know, Oddworld Soulstorm is if I'm understanding this correctly, a reimagining of Oddworld's Abe's Exodus.
So you want me to? I'll fill in on that.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So what happened? I've told this story a couple times, but here's the reality of sort of time, history, business, and timing, and schedules, and partners, and all these things. But when we originally started the company, we were going to do a 5-part series, right? It was going to be part 1, part 2, and like that. That would equal the Oddworld quintology. But what happened was we were the first game was a nice hit for the publisher, but all the other developers slipped for that Christmas, or most of the developers. And I'm talking id slipped with Doom 2, Epic slipped with Unreal, the guys in Texas slipped with Duke Nukem. All those titles were supposed to be Christmas, and they slipped, but we made it on time. And but that was really bad for the publisher company that those games slipped. So long story short, they were then looking at us to say, you're the only one we can rely on for next year. We need you to do part 2 for next year. And we're like, that was not, there was no way, right? Like the engine was terrible for Abe's Odyssey. I mean, it was really the most painful thing to work with, right? It was like brushing your teeth with a single hair of the brush. You know, it was just really archaically painful. And so we were not intending to build the next game with that engine. We were not intending to build it in exactly the same format. We were planning on taking at least 2.5 years on it, at least, not have to deliver the next game in 9 months. But that's what we wound up sort of having to do. And I'm not saying they strong-armed us into it, but, you know, they own almost half the company, and you try to be good partners and you try to accommodate. And, you know, who knows where things would go if you didn't comply, you know. And I'm not saying there was any threats or anything like that, so please don't read anything else into it. It was just a decision that we went along with. But in the course of that, it completely derailed what my intention of the story was, and that sort of derailed the epic 5-part series right out of the gate. Abe's Odyssey was complete. That was the summary of that story quite well. It was very sort of simple fable tale that would open up into more complicated storytelling, a deeper themes that would be happening, and we'd really start digging in deeper to the universe. But that's not what happened, because we had to get a game out in 9 months. In the course of that, it was so much pressure and had to happen so fast that we started to get a little more goofy with some of the content. Like if you look, it became more like jokes. The themes got a little less deep for the sake of expediency, you know? So it was like, what can we get done? And then we're on the Exodus. It's like, oh, what can we do with this engine? Because it's just god awful, you know? We didn't have time to make a lot of new characters work. So it was like, well, what if we made the blind Mudokons, you had to tell them to wait or they'll walk into objects and die. You know, it was like, well, we can do that in 9 months. You know, we can get these little things to work. So it was really, Exodus was really, at the end of the day, it was a better sort of playing succinct game. And as I've seen fans talk about it at times, they go, it was twice the game, but half the heart. Right. And I think that was kind of an accurate description. And the team had done a great job. Like everyone did a great job. And it was a very difficult thing to achieve. But it got us off track from what that story was. And that was, for me, I had a very specific idea of what part 2 was that opens up 3, 4, and 5. And basically the slave living in the meat processing plant in the third world will eventually, you know, figure out that he's not just got a good job, the retirement plan's a lie, they're going to chop up everyone. And he becomes the catalyst that begins the movement of the slaves freeing themselves in this continent of Mudos on Oddworld. And then the second title was around the brew and how the brew was used to sort of pharmaceutically, through consumer products, keep people enslaved. And that was a mystery that we would unfold in that game. So while Abe's Exodus had brew, and it was a well laid out game. It was people did a great job for the era. Things were pulling together on it, but it really derailed that story. And at the time, you know, without getting too much baggage of the history there, that is something that kind of continued to happen to us in different ways. So then that publisher is now failing and going out of business, and they're getting acquired by people that we don't know and are in a different country, different culture, and they're not doing it very well either. And so this company is kind of, you know, they're trying to figure out how to cut everyone's budgets. You know, complicated things is going on, real survival in the industry kind of moments. And out of that, we wind up going over, you know, having problems with the PS2. And then we go over to Xbox. And when we went to Xbox, they were looking at us as a launch title for Munch. And that shaped the title as like, we see you as the competitor for Mario on our platform versus Nintendo. And it was like, okay, but that kind of and I'm not saying we weren't in alignment with what we needed to do to survive, but again, it was skewing the title a little young and a little youthful, versus I wanted it to get more intense and keep sort of a youthful charm, but get into really deep, dark, complicated themes, and just kind of sort of have that irony of sort of, black comedy and just these really dark, relevant themes about, the dark side of globalism. And to bring the short of it, then with Stranger, I just felt, let's just break out of the quintology, because I don't like where it's going, and I'm just doing a repair job rather than like fulfilling a vision that had a really great arc across the big epic 5-part series. So when we had the success of New and Tasty, which quite honestly was all we could really afford to build at the day, we were like, well, we've been having success republishing old titles, converting them onto other platforms, bringing Munch to PS3, things like that. And it was like, well, or Stranger to PS3, and Munch, I believe, went to PS3 as well. But so we were coming out of all that. We redid Abe's Odyssey as New and Tasty, and then that really had more success than we were actually expecting. And it was a difficult game to get done, but we got that done. And then from there, we kept on asking the audience, like, what would you like to see next? And they kept saying, Exodus, do the same thing to Exodus. And that was our existing fan base. And we were like, well, damn, Exodus was not the game I really wanted to build. So if we're going to revisit Exodus, then let's go back to the original vision of what that part 2 was supposed to be narratively. And then we're back on that track of sort of the darkening quintology that gets really intense. And it doesn't, just become sort of youthful comedy with some dark tones, but it actually gets intense and more epic in all ways of proportion. And so Bennie and I are looking at this, and we're deciding, wow, it's a big task to bite off a whole new game, all the new designs,
Absolutely.
Not to underestimate the effort involved. We're on our own. We'd be paying for itself. Do we think we can do it? And we decided to go for it. And, Sherry was supportive and wanted to do it. And so we went for it. And then in going for it, that's where it's it really has very little semblance at all to anything Exodus, except certain themes and certain ideas and certain places and certain characters reemerge, but they're more closer to what the original vision was. And that's not anything close to what the original Abe's Exodus that released to the public was. So it's really a brand new game, and it's a revisioning for us. And if we're successful at that, then we're re-kicking off the quintology, and hopefully the audience says, please show us part 3.
So basically, Soulstorm is now the official part 2 in the quintology.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right.
I mean,
that doesn't. Let me just say, that doesn't necessarily cancel out Munch, but it's just like we're just putting that on a different timeline.
Okay, I was wondering about that because Munch's Odyssey is actually supposed to be game 2.
Yep. So hence the sort of, this is what happens with business. Shit just happens. Time, opportunity, partnerships, financial constraints, time constraints on schedule. These things they shape product as much as vision does. Yes, they do. Like
there are numerous market forces at work with any title.
Yep.
Now, any series. And I suppose it's good that you've come to a point where you can tell your story the way it was intended. It's like as free of interference as possible, is from where I can see.
Yes, that's the idea. And so the only interference we have now is, what is it like being on your own as independents in the business, building things that are closer to AAA. And that there's its own story, because you're really on your own. You don't have big publishers that need you to survive. If you get into trouble, you got to bail it out yourself. I mean, there's all kinds of cause and effects. You don't have marketing budgets, so you really need to do everything along the way to kind of co-promote to your social audience and hope that you're building something that's fancy and schmancy enough that the big boys at the stores want to promote it because it makes them look good. right? And that's really sort of the niche that we're in is even with New and Tasty, we didn't really have marketing budget, so it was just social marketing. But the key is if we build beautiful games that hit audiences' expectations and they're unique, then when the stores are doing their sales or they need something or they have a slow week, we should always be a go-to property. And it's kind of worked out that way. Like, Steam, to this day, Steam, Microsoft, Sony, Nintendo, come a sale period, someone misses a slot, something opens up, they'll contact us because we've got a whole library, and they can align our catalog to the price points of what they were hoping to sell that week or something like that. And we basically get free marketing out of that. But if we started making lower quality games, we could throw that graciousness out the window because we wouldn't be getting it.
I can definitely see that. It's like, I suppose along those lines, this is a thing that we will have to talk about, but in case the news was missed, Oddworld Soulstorm has signed on with the Epic Game Store. And I guess my first question here is, how's the reaction been on that?
Well, it's, very good actually, because I think I can't say that it wasn't a concern, because obviously there's a reason you're asking the question, right?
It's a concern,
right? And so for us, it was like, well, we got to look at what's happening with market perceptions and then development realities, right? Now, when it comes to the project of Soulstorm, we were biting off in some ways, more than we could chew. So our budget was increasing, and we're our own entity. And if we are going to pay it strictly with our own money and no one helping out or pitching in along the way, and I'll clarify what that means. But if we're doing it with our own money, that means the project's going to take longer, because we can only spend as fast as we're earning, right? And the further we get away from New and Tasty, then the less we'll be earning, right? Because that's just the life of product cycles and price points and things like that. So we were like, this one's taken us a long time, and we don't want it to take another couple of years. We need to bring it home, and we need to be on time in the market, and we want to hit a number of timings in the marketplace. And we've been working on it a long time already. So to accelerate that, we looked at different ways that could happen. And the most productive way that could happen for us was with Epic. And Epic had reached out, and so that led to conversation. And in those conversations, we were able to strike an agreement that was pretty wonderful for us, but it did mean exclusivity on the Epic Store. Now, compare that to what's been happening on Steam, and I want to say Steam is really where we found our independence. So right. I'm very grateful, and I'm very respectful of everything Steam has granted us, and we've sold lots of games on Steam. And however, the environment of Steam has changed a lot. And let me also just say, and this is just true, one of the reasons we got on there early was when it was still being a curated network. And fortunately, Gabe Newell just liked the Oddworld games. So we were like, hey, Gabe, can we get the games on your store? He was like, yeah, I like your games. Let's do it. Let's get them on there. And it was really that easy, right? Mm-hmm. And he just happens to also be one of the people I think is the most brilliant in the industry, and I think proven that many times. But the store today has a different set of challenges, right? And the biggest one is discovery, because what happened when they opened the store up to everyone could start publishing and it was no longer curated? Well, what happened?
There's a lot of stuff on Steam.
And what does it do? It means less sales and harder to discover. So we're watching general sales of the average title go way down. And we're watching the discovery process get a lot harder to find visibility. Mm-hmm. So in our own sales projection, we're like, we're going to make less money on Steam this time, no matter what. because of the Steam climate. And I'm not exactly sure what what their plans are. I mean, Steam, is not stupid, right? So if they've now got a serious competitor in space, they need to do something. I just don't know what the plans are. You were going to say? Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like a lot of what their plans are, from what I've seen, involve like, first of all, it's tinkering with the algorithm, a lot of that, and like there's this big overhaul that's been about 2-3 years in the making now.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, so they are working on it.
Yeah, they got to be. I mean, it's the biggest game network on the world, right?
Well,
in
yeah,
the world.
yeah.
And whatever. I mean, I think it's largely. I'm not exactly sure what the ownership structure is, but Gabe is his own, master of his own kingdom, and he's not a stupid guy. So I'm sure they have a number of plans that are visible and a lot of plans that aren't visible, but I can't say I know what they are or how that's going to change how Steam would be for us when we release.
Well, it's like, there's only so much you can do, because, how do I put this? Steam is always going to be a large marketplace. Steam is always going to have, tons and tons of games. Mm-hmm. But, that's kind of true of any store that's been around for a while. Mm-hmm. Discoverability is a problem for not just like Steam, but say Apple, Google, what have you.
Mm-hmm.
It's just
it's a challenge for Sony store as well.
Absolutely.
I'd say Xbox does that part better. They don't have the same install base, so everyone's got different gives and takes. But the key to us was the nature of the deal, and the nature of the deal is that we just got an advance against sales. Mm-hmm. So we didn't have to sell a piece of the company. We didn't have to give up royalties. We didn't have to do the things you would normally do to get financing. Right. And so an advance against sales was sort of a gracious offering to us that was extremely helpful at a great time when we could really use it. And so what we did with the audience was we said, well, let's, we grouped on it and we go, a lot of people are taking slack. There's a lot of hostility for some people that went to Epic, and a lot of that was around crowdfunded titles that had already pre-sold keys. They were
there's a lot of acrimony around the Epic Game Store due to various factors. It's not just crowdfunding; it's snatching games from Steam 2 weeks from release.
So to that point, right?
Yeah, it's just a lot of that stuff.
Yeah. So there's other factors, but that was a big one. Why there was certain parties were targeted, right? And the way that they then handled it was not necessarily the smoothest way to handle it with your people that wanted to play your game. And so we looked at that and we go, well, what's worked for us in the past, and what really works for us is tell the audience the truth and go to them early, so you're sharing with them why you did what you did. And if it's the truth and if it's transparent, then we'll live with the results of that action. Mm-hmm. And fortunately, I think we've been, well, let me say, people like yourself or interviewers over the years often tell me, that's why I like talking to you, because you're honest with it. And at times I take a hit for that, right? And make no mistake, you can just go talk to the big companies and you can see exactly what it's like to talk to people who are reading the marketing PR department script, and it's the most boring fucking interviews I could ever listen to.
We've had those people on the show.
Yeah, it's like, could you please stop reading what someone else wrote for you to say? How about a human being today and less of the marketing robot?
Be better than the Atari Corporation.
Yeah. So in that, we went to the audience. It was announced at Gamescom, and we did a release to the audience, and we were like, here's the deal, guys. This is where we're coming from. It's straight as that, and That's what it is. And surprisingly, I mean, not surprisingly, but the audience was actually very supportive. So they said, well, you pissed me off a little, but I can understand why you did it, and thank you for being honest with us. And for us, that's about the best response we can usually expect, is that we were straight. We don't have anything to hide. This is the condition. We're trying to make great games. We pay for them ourselves. The unspoken is no one has, unless you're doing it, no one has any idea what that means behind the scenes in terms of, how many hours we work, how many sacrifices we make in our life, how much risk is on the table, what do we lose if we fail. There's all kinds of stuff that adds to the daily pressure of life. But, it wound up being a good thing for us.
I mean, yeah, we've had people on the show who made games that didn't make it, it's a harsh world out there.
It is.
It is. And I would add that, not only to what Lorne was saying, that it's working out for us, but Epic's just been a great partner, right? They really want to see the game succeed, and they want to be as supportive as they can, and not delve too deeply into like, we want you to do this or that. It's just like, how can we be there to help and support? And so the relationship has been really positive.
That's good to hear. Like I said, it's always a thorny issue around the Epic Game Store because, well, people are getting death threats over it. Like, and
yeah, but it's the game industry, right? So, like, I mean, I can't count how many death threats I've gotten. I mean, I remember or arguing with debating live with Jack Thompson, right? You guys remember Jack Thompson? And he was saying, oh, I got death threats. I was like, everyone who ever played Xbox Live gets death threats, dude. Like, grow up. The kid's 12 years old. You don't need to call Secret Service, and you don't have to have all these security guards with you, bodyguards with you, because we're having a talk. No one's going to come after you. It's called the game industry. People get hot and heavy under the collar, but it's really, it's a pretty tame audience. It's not like gamers got together and robbed a bank. I mean, these are stories we don't read, right? And so the game industry is very vocal. We got Gamergate, we got all kinds of controversy. You got 4chan, you got, all kinds of chemistries. And if you're going to be around this area, you got to have some thick skin because they're going to come at you. I've got so many different types of threats, but honestly, I don't take it that personally. I mean, it sucks, when the internet is not liking you. It's a terrible thing, and I'm sure you guys know how that feels at times.
Yeah, I just don't like, like friends of mine getting death threats and all that stuff. But
that's crossing some lines, when they're not even involved. But
it's like, it's an ugly situation that doesn't have to be an ugly situation. Like,
yeah, but it's the internet.
I know. It's like, I know how it is. I don't have to like it.
No, I totally agree. I mean, it's a terrible thing, like when here's something that happens to me. It's happened to me a lot, right? I'll do a show and I'll do 5 interviews. And in the 5 interviews, the same thing might be touched on in each interview. And maybe one of those things is controversial, meaning I might have been complaining about someone or a business practice or something like this, right? And so that'll go out on the internet live. And it's okay, right? I might take a little slack because someone has a difference of opinion, like if you want to see people come out at you with their fangs and claws fully out, say something about Nintendo that isn't complimentary, man. And they're just going to come at you.
I've seen this.
Yeah. And that happens, I understand. And
or say something about Sony. Like, that's also
unless you're talking to Xbox fans, and then they're fine with it.
Yeah.
But yeah, to your point, but Nintendo probably has the oldest, most impassioned audience that's still in the game business, right? Everyone else is newbies in the scheme of things. Steam's a newbie in the scheme of things. Sony's a newbie in the scheme of things, and so is Xbox, right? But Nintendo was here long before any of those companies thought about having a platform. And so you have that, right? What do we have almost going on almost 35 years of legacy with Nintendo. I'm thinking of math out of I'm not even sure what day it is right now, but we're into multi-decades of their success, and they rocked it. So you have a more really defending audience on their part. If you could have fans that are as rabid as the Nintendo fans, you're in great shape. You're doing great, man, because they're tough. But
No doubt.
back to you. Yeah.
No doubt. Anyway, getting back to the deal itself, is it a standard one?
Don't know. I think, different people have different deals with different incentives. I think if we were in the situation where we had pre-sold keys on Steam and things like that, and we're expecting in 2 weeks, we probably could have got a better deal because they'd know we'd be paying more blowback. But for us, we hadn't announced. There was a number of things we hadn't announced yet, and we try to get wiser over the ages and not promise something that we wind up being wrong about. And so I think our passage into that Steam, into the Epic Store community was a little smoother because it didn't have those obvious friction points.
Mm-hmm.
But some people are just going to say, well, I will never buy your games anymore. And it's like, well, I can't really help that, But let me tell you something else. If we went out of business, you wouldn't be buying our games anymore either. So I'd lean on the side of I'd rather survive.
Yeah.
Keep on making stuff than keep a few really pissed off people happy and go broke.
Yeah, it's like, believe me, I understand why developers, especially indie developers, will be taking Epic Store money. I mean, it's like we know how much Epic's been paying out in a couple of cases, and it's pretty impressive.
Mm-hmm.
But for clarification's sake, like a standard deal is 1 year of exclusivity.
I can't speak to the terms of the deal.
Right. I'm just saying what is usually. There are differences, like Borderlands 3 is 6 months, Red Dead Redemption 2 is 1 month, but I'm just saying.
And I'm sure they got more for that 1 month than we got in our whole deal, because you're in like big AAA titles.
Oh yeah.
Saying, okay, if we're not here, then they got more leveraging power. But let me say one other thing about it is that we've known those guys since we started, right? And so we know, the founders since they began and before they had an office, meaning they had split off from id and some other groups in Texas and came together, and when we were releasing Abe's Odyssey, they were still a virtual company. Like, they didn't even really have an office. Right. And then I can tell you that I know Tim's getting a lot of slack out there right now, but my engagements with Tim Sweeney back in the 90s were such where, we were testing out Unreal, and this is how I got to know the guys more. And we were all with GT Interactive, so there was a sort of synergy there, press tours together and things like this. But the guy was absolutely brilliant when it came to code. He wrote a volumetric light renderer on the PC in 1997 because I asked for it. Right. And then he goes, let me think about it. And the next day he came back. He goes, how's this? And I was like, oh, my God, I asked for it. This is a technical thing, right? Volumetric light rendering is something still
not easy,
still coming online for games. Right. Still and barely. And this is something I asked him to do in 97. It was kind of a joke. I was kind of like, I'm gonna give him a little task and see how well he choose this one. Right. And he comes back the next day and he goes, well, try this. And it worked. Now, it didn't. He goes, it would need to be optimized. It's kind of a complicated problem. I was like, yeah, I know, because I just made another company I used to work for write that technology, and it took forever, and it was really difficult, and it was very challenging. But this guy did it in real time on the PC era, 1997, and that blew me away. And I had already, worked on movies in CG, had been doing CG, Academy Award level CG for a while now from the effects company. So he was a really unique mind. And I know he's taken a lot of slack, and I have not been keeping up with all the verbiage and what the dialogue is as to why people are so upset and things like this. I got to admit, I've been too busy to dive into that. But
it's better to just not.
Yeah, there's probably a fortunate benefit in that, right?
Yeah.
But these
like I
guys,
said,
it wasn't like this was a company that. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead.
yeah, like I said, it's just a lot of, let's say, internet back and forth. I mean,
Yeah, it's the internet, right? It's the hostile internet, which is one of the things I love about it, But, and then until it blows back on you, and then it's just terrible and god awful. However, what I wanted to say is that because I knew Mark and I knew Tim, and we knew Cliff when he was there, and then the others that are involved, at that level. But those are some of the most visible figures. But these were people that were like us. They were developers finding their way, and they were, living kind of hand to mouth as well, and they were reinvesting in their own gig. It wasn't like Amazon is getting involved and they want to start a game store. It wasn't, to me, it wasn't like that. It was like these guys that were hardcore developers, and they were now, they had a surprising degree of success with their recent title. And I'm just reading this from the sidelines. It's not like I've been talking about, with Fortnite, right? Just an amazing amount of success. And then they decided to go after the store. And so we knew them as people. We didn't know them as a company entity that was big time, starting a whole big new thing that was going to compete with another group that we knew as people. We knew them as humans first, and then they had this huge success. And yeah, anyway, so there was that. So it wasn't like we were looking at it as this new thing that we didn't know. I mean, I didn't know about the store so much, but we knew the people. And when it came to that, there was a long history there, a lot of sort of battles that we had fought through together, just in different tanks, so to speak.
Right. I mean, lots changed. Like,
yeah.
But anyway, one last question about the Epic Games Store, though I'm not sure if you can answer this. Are there any plans to introduce, the previous Oddworld games to the Epic Games Store?
Absolutely. But I can't go into more detail on what.
I think I can guess, but I'll leave that off air.
Okay. I wish I could be more forward, but some things are
like I said.
Agreements.
I've been paying attention to what Epic's doing, and I've seen how they introduce older games.
Well, it makes sense. Let me just back up a second, right? Is if you're creating a series, and now you're delivering, midway in the series, then obviously you want the earlier parts of that series to be available to those people who are only on that store.
Right.
Because there will be Epic Store customers that were never on Steam, right? I'm not saying that's I don't know what the ratio is, but that's always the case. There's always an element of a store that's isolated to that, a demographic that's isolated to that store.
From what I understand, it depends. Like, they're actually, like, Epic is trying to attract, like, the people who use Steam and all that, but there's also a lot of people who play Fortnite that never use Steam, but it's a whole actually complicated thing.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Because it's like, the people who play Fortnite, they're actually not buying games on the Epic Game Store. It's like people who are invested in a free-to-play economy tend not to stray outside that economy.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like, you could buy other games on the Epic Game Store, or you could buy several more months of Fortnite's Battle Pass and insert other premium purchases.
That's pretty much how it works. It's Steam too. Like, people who play CS:GO or Dota 2, they're not the ones buying Torchlight or whatever.
Well, this is partly why you only have so many free-to-play successes at a time. Kind of like the way you only had so many MMOs, right? At a time, is the players get so all consumed in it that they're usually playing one. But if you were in like console games with racing games and you had a racing game fan, they might have 3 different racing games that they're always following and always playing.
Yep.
But when you get into these more deep, let's just say there's a difference in design on the free-to-play, right? And if you really talk to the free-to-play designers, and my experience with talking to them is mostly Russia and China It's not the guys that are doing. I mean, some of them with the social games here, like Zynga, stuff like that, which is
Right.
a different flavor of free, but in that, it's all about dopamine impulses, psychologically driven, point of purchase likelihoods. Where is the customer's mind, the player's mind, to be right in that condition to want to spend now, right? And they're doing that as is science throughout the experience. And when I say they, I mean the world of it. No individuals are. Who's ever making the most money, everyone else is trying to follow. Make no mistake, right? They're all jealous of the one who's making more money, and they want to understand the science better if someone else is beating them.
Well,
But there's only so much room for so many titles when the titles are designed to be that all-consuming in the hours that you play. And sorry, I just cut off. Was that you, Benny? I just cut off.
No,
Oh,
not me.
sorry.
Yeah, and this is actually extending to the current modern AAA set of games. Your Anthems, your Tom Clancy Breakpoints.
Mhm.
They're becoming basically free-to-play games you pay $60 for.
And that's having a little blowback, right? Like, how happy are players about that?
Not very happy.
So how long is that going to last?
Who
As
knows?
long as it can, which
Yeah, it's like-
unfortunately people not being happy isn't stopping people from doing it. So
Well, it's like
I mean,
you're-
the companies really don't care if you give them like $60 and then $20 more and then $20 more. They don't really care whether you're smiling or grumbling while you do it.
Well, I mean, it's gotten to the point of arrogance, especially with like the loot box sets, stuff like, the NBA 2K debacle and so on and so forth, and surprise mechanics. Yeah, it's like
Yeah. So I would say this is a bit where I'm going to bring it back to us for a second and how we see the landscape is if you head off in the direction of those games, you probably there's a number of things, servers, it's got to be server based. You're going to have millions of customers, of which only possibly 3% is actually paying for the game, and then you still have to serve for the 97% that aren't, and then you're figuring out how to try and shed off the 97% and increase your 3% portion of the audience to pay more. All these ratios in there and different dynamics, because it's all happening in real time, right? It's analytics up to wazoo, and all of that stuff is figuring out ways to. Well, let me say it's definitely figured out ways to make a lot more money, because the experiences are, I wouldn't necessarily say more engaging is the right word.
they're
Right.
more psychologically manipulative. They're
And
based off of ideas like the Skinner box.
And maybe that's true, right? And in that there's a big overhead in taking the risk to do that. Like if you're going to have 10 million players, Benny, what are you going to be paying a month? $100,000 in server fees,
If not more.
if not
Yeah.
more, right?
Yeah.
And so that means if you have a bad month, there goes $100,000, and there goes another bad month, there goes another $100,000. like it can really affect you fast. Look at how fast Lawbreakers shut down, right?
Right.
So you have an infrastructure that's waiting to hold all these people, and all of a sudden, you can't afford to run it for how small the install base is. So for us, we look at it and we go, we think that there's a portion of the market that wants the sort of the good old game, which is, here's my money, give me the game, and don't milk me through it. And we think that portion is a increasing demographic right now, because we're just seeing it in our own sampling of the audience. We're seeing people say, I'm just so tired of being ground down. There's a great video channel, and they do fake gameplay scenarios with live action figures.
Uh-huh.
I forget what it's called, but it's like how you get ground on a free-to-play game, how they make you do all these chores just to collect more things, but nothing was worth anything anyway. It's just, all these stupid gates to make you grind. And we see more blowback happening. I see more people saying, I'm not going to name the IPs, but they're just going, it's really good stuff. It's really high quality stuff. I just hate what they're doing to me as the player. And I hate how I'm paying $60 for the game and then they're milking me like it's a free game. I really don't like it, but I'm a fan of the franchise, but I'm not sure how much longer. We hear a lot of that.
Yeah. And like, I mean, and it's not even just say a fan of franchise. You know, once again, like Anthem. You know, a lot of people are fans of BioWare, and you know, Anthem's been one of the bigger debacles this year. Like,
yeah, and I think there's a lot of reasons for that. Personally,
yeah, yeah, but yeah,
but one of them is, let me just speak to it for a second. And this will probably get me in trouble, but when you try to create a culture that makes it safe and friendly for everyone, and everyone has their safe space.
Okay, no.
Right?
No.
Yeah, don't go there?
No. Let's not go there.
Okay. Versus trying to create a culture where everyone is great at what they do. And
anyway.
At the end of the day, those things are going to make a difference in the marketplace.
Anyway, let's get back to the Oddworld game, Soulstorm game. Because while this game is appearing on the Epic Games Store, it's using Unity, correct?
That's right.
Correct.
Yes. And from what I've been hearing, like this game is apparently pushing the boundaries of Unity.
Yeah, we're pushing on every system, from rendering to CPU optimizations to number of NPCs on screen. There's just a lot of areas, even in cinematography and composition, like how we use their camera systems to tell a story intelligently. All of those things we're really kind of either pushing to the limits or working with them to write special, unique pieces to function well in our game, or we're writing our own on top of the Unity platform.
Interesting. I remember this game being revealed at the Unity GDC conference. What was it, 2018?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that was 2019.
2019.
2019, yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's like, how closely are you working with Unity on the Soulstorm project?
Benny?
Yeah, so we're working pretty closely with their engineering team, just because of the challenges for Soulstorm and how far we pushed it. Unity is a great platform to start with, to build our foundations on, but there's unique elements in our 2.9D platform layouts in our worlds that aren't necessarily perfectly aligned with, the extensiveness of the tool. And so, we've had to work either within that framework to expand it and build elements that support our kind of gameplay, or just build our own and then integrate that into Unity. But Unity's engineering team, their Spotlight team, has been invaluable because they know the engine the best. So when we come up against obstacles that would normally take us, X number of cycles to be able to figure out how to best implement or architect something, it's like a, hit easy button to, as easy as it gets when you can talk to the engineer that built the specific system that you're trying to build on top of, and they'll tell you, no, like, this is how you build this on top to be performant, right? And so you just don't really get that in many other ways. Like, so that relationship has been invaluable for us because it's been a force multiplier.
And like, sounds like it, because we got a lot of people who do work in Unity on this program. I don't, it's like, I don't think we've ever had somebody who's, maybe not, who's worked this closely with Unity. I could be wrong about that, but it's like, a lot of developers on the program, they work in Unity. It's not necessarily they got a relationship with Unity. So,
and I'll say, go ahead.
It is interesting to get insights into that.
Yeah, and I would say that Unity as a company, they're very excited about Soulstorm, and they've offered a tremendous amount of support and help to get us to where we're at today. And what's great about them is I can pick up a phone and call, or I can reach out on Slack, and I get answers within, the hour or 2 hours, right? It's not like we're waiting weeks or we put in a ticket somewhere. They want to see us succeed, right? And so they've been really, really a great partner to work with.
That's good to hear. Now, shifting to an aspect I don't think we've touched on yet is the music of Soulstorm. You know, is this going to be in the like what we encountered in the original game, or is this going to be something different?
Well, the original game was, I mean, you have technology which plays differently, right? Like in the original games, we were on the PSX. The audio capabilities were, by comparison, in the day we were thrilled to see them, but by comparison today, you're in an archaic class of technology, right? And so just from there, we should expect better audio, better, more dynamic, a number of things, a lot more channels of audio, a lot more unique recordings, things like that. But the original composer was Josh Gabriel, and he, at that time, he was just at the very beginning of what became sort of a worldwide, kind of legendary DJing composer. He's a brilliant sound designer and composer. And so he went on to form Gabriel and Dresden, Electronica, Motorcycle, Ann Dane. These are different acts of Josh's. He's had, well over 20 dance club #1 hits, remakes of famous female vocalists turning into for club tracks, and a lot of that. So he's had a lot of life out there outside of this. But he did the original soundtrack because he and I were friends in college. He was my roommate, and so Josh is back and he's doing the soundtrack for this game. So Odyssey and Exodus was scored by Josh, and now here we are again, and Soulstorm will be scored by Josh as well.
Oh. And is he going for like like what kind of instrumentation was in the original game, or is it going to be something to, like, I'm basically asking, is it going to be like tonally darker to match the rest of the game?
Well, a lot of people say that the original soundtracks were kind of dark. It was a little industrial, I'd say, and at the time, that was kind of a, if you get into the mid 90s when we were developing it, right? Released in the late 90s. But that was a thing back then. And right now, industrial's kind of fallen off, right? Samplers were relatively new, so people could make unique types of sounds that they weren't hearing before. The 80s really birthed samplers. And so that started changing things. So it had a bit of that industrial tone, but I wouldn't say it was really upbeat music. It wasn't very happy music. We were always going for sort of epic and ominous, and we're continuing on that trend for sure.
Interesting. Let's see. In regards to other platforms, what games are you are you Xbox One, PlayStation 4? Are you looking?
We're just right now. We're just saying consoles, but we can't clarify exactly which and what at this time.
That, once again, that's not surprising since the new consoles are about a year out. So it's like if Oddworld Soulstorm appears on, say, the PlayStation 5, I wouldn't be surprised. Anyway, back in terms of the PC, is this game going to be Windows only, or is it going to be a Mac and Linux build?
Bennie?
So currently we have it set up so that we can go to any platform, but we're focused on PC right now.
Okay.
And I can say that our Linux versions in the past just really didn't fly. It was just an extremely small audience. So but it wasn't that it was so it's harder to make sense out of Linux these days.
I've heard that from some developers. Some developers still like supporting Linux. I think that's a size issue. Yeah. Granted, Unity does make it easier.
It does.
I know it's not a button click or anything, but it's a lot easier to do Linux these days.
We're definitely positioned well for conversions over to every platform we're targeting at that level, but there's only so much bandwidth, so we have to be strategic, and we'll make that decision kind of moving forward in time. But right now, PC going from PC to Linux, PC even to Mac, just isn't the stretch that it used to be for us. Dealing with legacy processors, legacy OS, 64-bit environments, trying to handle all of the technical debt and challenges that we have to get over to those platforms. Now things are just way more standardized. So it's on my radar, but we're definitely honing in and focused in PC world right now.
Right. Anyway, I suppose my last question at this point, since we are getting low on time, is about the emotion system of Exodus. How is that being revamped for Soulstorm?
I wouldn't say that it is. We're trying to build in more emotional reflection as an ongoing relative action, but in Soulstorm, one of the things, and you got to realize where that came from in the beginning, right? Is we were like, we're going back to the beginning of the conversation, we've gone full circle, but it's like,
yes.
What can we do, And in that, let me tell you, it was not easy figuring out what can we do, having to get a game done in 9 months with the engine and we have and the assets we have and all those things. And so we were trying to squeeze, like, well, what else can we do with these guys? And we were like, well, what if when they saw people get killed, they got depressed and then they wouldn't follow you anymore, right? And then what if they saw too much of that, they'd start to commit suicide? And that increased that type of play for that era pretty well, I think. And but for this era, it got tedious. You're like, okay, this guy had an emotional fit, but now I've got 20 of them following me. It got more than we wanted to dive into, and we didn't think it was as fun. So we didn't go that route. We didn't go like, okay, we're going to manage their emotions. Instead, we gave them a different capability, which is we're going to add them as a force multiplier to Abe's abilities. And that's going to have a number of causes and effects that influence the game. So we chose to invest in some slightly different areas, and the emotional management was not one of them.
Well, that's interesting.
Yeah, it's like there's certain things that were fun then, and they're fun in your memory. And you're like, yeah, I want more of that. But if you played that today, you realize, wait a minute, I kind of been playing this for 22 years already. And you're like, yeah, you got to take some creative chances and break into different areas. And then you have to really be selective about where you're spending the money that you have, so you don't screw up, too bad. And in that, we chose different battles to fight this time, and we really wanted to break through really into new ground. It wasn't like we were trying to reproduce Exodus.
Right. Well, anyway, I'm going to see if my colleagues here have any final questions for y'all.
I actually have one. Does Soulstorm leave better into Munch's Odyssey and Stranger's Wrath, or is it basically going to kick those out of the canon?
Well, it just sort of treats them as though it's something that took place, at in a different place. We're not really weaving their narratives into the thread. Abe stays on the same journey. Munch still could have happened. Like it could have happened after this game, Munch happened, or you know what I mean, or before this game, Munch happened. But for
Munch's alternate universe now.
Yeah, but for yeah, it's still, we can still go there. Those characters still live in the universe. It's all compatible. But we really wanted to get back to this core backbone and sort of straighten it out to a big arcing epic. And in that, it's not like we're concerned that this game is going to drop into Munch in a very, very sort of, I'd say, in a very fitting way, as much as this game is going to drop into game 3, the Epic 3, in a very fitting way. And that's where we wanted to realign to, right? And Stranger was perfectly intact for the universe. I'd love to see these characters crossing paths with each other in the future. There's lots of opportunities to do that. But for this, we're really focused on Abe's journey. Abe's journey of that original, the guy from the third world who winds up bringing his game to the first world and changes the world. Like the least likely guy changes the world. And that's the main arc that we wanted to focus on this time, is getting back to that idea and then really, blazing ahead with that focus forward.
Fair enough. I think that's it from me. So, any of you guys have anything else?
I'm good.
Okay, gentlemen.
All right. Well, the game is Oddworld Soulstorm. It's currently slated for release in 2020. I'm guessing the price is still being figured out.
Yes, we have not announced the price yet.
Okay. Yeah, so be sure to look for it on the Epic Game Store and consoles to be announced next year. And that'll about do it for this installment. Sorry, sometimes the interviews run long. I promise we will talk about the Apple Arcade next week. Anyway, coming up on Friday, October 11th, we will be having John Ingle of Inkle on the program again. Looking forward to that. And coming up on our Sunday reviews, we have reviews of Neocab, Himno for the Nintendo Switch, Trip, and A Glider's Journey. So be sure to join us for all of that. And until Friday, I shall wish you good gaming.
Thank you.